My name is Celia Williams, and I am 31 years old. My mother died at 4:10 in the morning, on her 56th birthday, while I was asleep 11 minutes away. My father called me at 6:20. He said, "She's gone." I called the funeral home. "Go back to sleep." 6 days later, he announced his wedding. When I asked to mourn her, he checked his watch and told me to focus on the present. Then he put me in charge of his vendors because I'm good with numbers and because he assumed I would never look up. He didn't know that a bookkeeper reads everything, every invoice, every notice, every account number, even the ones that come to the wrong house. He called the funeral home. Remember that he told me he called them. And a little over 8 months later, in front of 140 people, that sentence came back for him. I want to start with the chair because the chair is what people in Halloway still talk about. My father's name is Dale Williams. He sells real estate. His face has been on a billboard on Route 42, past the grain elevator, since I was in middle school. Rotary Club, 11 years on the county fair committee. If you'd asked anyone in Halloway about him before last August, they'd have said the same thing. Good guy, straight shooter. My mother's name was Rosalind. She did payroll for the Halloway School District for 22 years. She paid the mortgage on the house my father still lives in. He called her the worrier, in front of people, the way you'd describe a mildly inconvenient pet. She was diagnosed in August of 2023. Ovarian, stage 4 at the first appointment, which is what happens when a woman spends 2 decades assuming her own symptoms are a scheduling problem. I closed most of my business that September. I don't want your sympathy for that. I made a choice. It was not a hard one, and I would make it again. I'm a bookkeeper, certified, not a CPA, which is a distinction my father enjoyed making at dinner parties. I had about 60 small clients. I kept 9 of them and let the rest go. Then I moved into my parents' house and spent nearly 15 months sleeping in the living room recliner. That's not a figure of speech. My old bedroom became the supply room. Gauze, gloves, wound kits, the folding table for the med organizer. So I slept in the recliner. I got up at 2 in the morning when she called out. I learned to flush a drain from a video on my phone, on the bathroom floor with the door shut so she wouldn't hear me start it over. I paid for the hospital bed, the wheelchair ramp, the copays. By the end, I was carrying $18,000 on a credit card at 19%. My father never asked where the money came from. He never refused to pay. That's the thing. Refusing would have been a decision, and decisions are things you can point at afterward. He simply never asked, so the question never existed, so nothing was ever his fault. He kept going to Rotary on Tuesdays. He kept having lunch at Delaney's. Once, in the 11th month, he came home while I was changing the bedding, stood in the doorway with his coat still on, and said, "She looks better today." She did not look better. She weighed 96 pounds. In August of 2024, he hired a licensed practical nurse through a home health agency. I'm not going to pretend I was smarter than I was. I was grateful. Her name was Vivian Ashcroft. She came through an agency called Fairlane Home Care. 41 calm, good hands. She called my mother sweetheart in a voice that sounded like it meant it. She showed up on time. She wrote things down. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in a year. So I bought her a thank you card and a box of pastries from the bakery on Main whose books I keep. I wrote something in the card about how she'd given our family a little piece. I thanked her. I want you to know that I thanked her. When people ask me why I stopped sleeping, that's the part I tell them. In October, my father took me aside in the kitchen. He was not angry. My father is never angry. He leaned against the counter with a glass in his hand and said, "Vivian says you're wearing her out." "What?" "The visits, the talking. She says your mother gets agitated after you're in there a long time. She says it's harder to get her settled. I remember the dish towel in my hand. I remember that I kept folding it. She's my mother. Nobody's saying she isn't. He took a sip. I'm just telling you what the professional said. Maybe back off a little, couple days. Let her rest. And here's the thing I have had to sit with in a small room on a Thursday once a week for the last several months. I backed off, not because I was afraid of him, but because a woman with a license told me my love was making my mother tired, and I believed her. I have always been the kind of person who assumes the problem is me. When somebody bumps into me at the grocery store, I apologize. That's not a personality. That's a reflex. I stayed away for 2 days. When I returned, I sat farther from the bed and spoke less. My mother reached for my hand once, and I remember thinking, don't let her get agitated. That is what I did to my mother in October of 2024 because somebody told me to. She died on December 8th at 4:10 in the morning. It was her 56th birthday. I wasn't there. I was asleep on a couch at my friend Nadine's place, 11 minutes away, because Vivian had told my father that the house was too crowded, and my father had told me to take a night. My phone had no missed calls. I checked it 3 times. Nothing. He called me at 6:20. She's gone. I called the funeral home. Go back to sleep. He had made the call. I mistook that for taking responsibility for everything that came after it. That's what he said. Word for word. I have thought about those 9 words more than I have thought about almost anything else in my life. And for a long time I only heard the last 4. Listen to the middle. My father authorized the cremation for December 13th. There was no service. My father said there was no point in one if you were going to do a memorial anyway, and that we'd do a memorial later when things settled down. 6 days after she died, on December 14th, I came to the house and he was standing at the kitchen table in a shirt I had never seen before. The casseroles were still in the refrigerator behind him, untouched. People had brought them to the door, and nobody had eaten a single one. He said, I'm marrying Vivian, August. I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from somebody else. I didn't say anything. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. The next day, I came back and I asked him for one thing. I said I wanted to hold a memorial for Mom. Something small. The Legion Hall, maybe, or just the backyard. An hour. I said I would organize all of it. I said I would pay for it. He looked at his watch. Then he said, Your mother is gone. Focus on the present. I didn't argue. I have never once argued with my father, and I am not going to tell you that I wish I had, because I don't think it would have changed a single day of what came next. I washed the casserole dishes, all 11 of them. I stacked them on the counter, and I labeled them with masking tape so they could go back to the right houses, and then I drove away. 3 weeks later, he slid a blue binder across his desk. Before the binder, there were the bags. In the first week of January, I went back to the house to get the rest of my things. I hadn't been living there since my mother died, but there were still boxes in the back bedroom. My winter clothes, my files, the plastic tub with my grandmother's dishes in it. The side door was open. There was a ladder in the hall. 2 overnight bags were already open beside my mother's closet. My things were already outside. 4 black contractor bags sitting on the concrete floor of the garage next to a snowblower that hadn't run since 2019. 28 years of my life in 4 bags, and the bags were not closed. Someone had just pushed the air out and stacked them. I opened the first one. On top, folded badly, was my mother's green cardigan, the one she wore in the kitchen. It was rolled up with 3 old toothbrushes and a plastic soap dish. They'd cleaned out her side of the bathroom and swept it in with my things, because to them it was all the same category. Things that used to belong to somebody. Vivienne stood in the doorway with a roller in her hand. She said, very kindly, "Take all the time you need." I didn't say anything to her. I've invented a dozen things I could have said, and none of them would have landed anywhere. She wasn't trying to sound cruel. That was the problem. She had confused efficiency delivered in a gentle voice with actual kindness. I picked up the cardigan. I put it in my car. I drove out of town on Route 42, and about a mile past the grain elevator, I pulled onto the shoulder underneath my father's billboard, the one with his face on it, 12 feet tall, smiling with his arms crossed, and I opened the car door and I was sick on the gravel. Then I wiped my mouth and I drove to Nadine's. Nadine Prescott owns Prescott Auto and Tire on the east side of town. She's 36, she has 2 daughters, and she's been my client since 2018. When I dropped 51 accounts to move in with my mother, she was the only one who didn't leave. She kept her own books just well enough to survive, and every few months, she'd text me a photo of a shoebox full of receipts with the caption, "Still waiting." She has an apartment over the garage, 12 feet by 14, a space heater, a hot plate, one window that looks out over the tire stacks. She handed me the key and said, "My books are a disaster. Fix them when you feel like it." That's what support actually looks like. Not money, work, somebody saying, "I still need you." She wouldn't take rent. I left $200 in her kitchen drawer every month anyway, and she left it sitting there, and neither of us ever mentioned it. Here is where I was in January of 2025. 9 clients, $1,190 in reliable monthly income. $18,000 on a credit card. 1 room over a tire shop, and 1 garbage bag of my mother's things that I could not bring myself to unpack. And my father was waiting on a check for $186,000. I knew the number because I was the one who filled out the claim. My mother's life insurance came through the school district, a group policy, spouse named as beneficiary, the way it is in half the households in this country. My father said he was too grief-stricken to handle the paperwork. So I completed the claim at his kitchen table, copied the account information from his checkbook, and placed the finished form in front of him to sign. Name of decedent, date of death, cause. Every box except his signature was filled in by my hand. That account number would matter later. The binder came in the middle of January. He called me down to the Halloway and Vance office, which is a storefront on Main with his name in gold vinyl on the glass. He didn't offer me coffee. He pushed a blue 3-ring binder across the desk, and it was heavy, and it was tabbed. "You're good at this kind of thing," he said. Inside, the caterer, the venue, the florist, the band, the photographer, the AV guy, invoices, contracts, a guest list with 140 names on it, a seating chart, a run of show, and a tab labeled Slideshow. A note clipped inside the cover authorized me to coordinate the vendors and prepare payments for his approval. "I want a tribute section for your mother. Short, tasteful, nothing heavy." He tapped the desk twice with 2 fingers, the gesture he used when a matter was closed. People need to see that we're okay. I understood the job immediately. He did not need a daughter. He needed a character reference, the dead woman's child standing before the Rotary Club and County Fair Committee to bless him, so that what he had done in 8 months could become something the whole town agreed was acceptable. I said no. He didn't raise his voice. My father has never once raised his voice at me. He leaned back in the chair, and he laced his hands behind his head, and he looked at the ceiling for a second, and then he said it in the same tone he uses to price a house. "You want to bury your mother?" The air went out of the room. "Are you keeping her?" "After the wedding," he said. "Smile. Get through it. Then we'll talk about your mother." I assumed the box was somewhere in the house, hidden because he knew I would take it if I found it. I stood up. I got as far as the door. "And Celia." He didn't turn around. "You make a scene, and I'll scatter her in Kessler Lake. You can go looking for her out there." As her surviving spouse, he was the one person the law presumed had the right to decide where she went. I believed he had the box, and I believed he could do it. I took the binder. People may think I took the binder because some part of me still wanted my father's approval. I didn't. I sat in the parking lot waiting for some feeling about him to arrive. Anger, grief, disappointment, anything. Nothing did. My father had become a countertop that needed wiping, an invoice that needed paying. He was a locked door between me and my mother, and a door is not something you hate. It is something you learn to open. I already believed I had failed her once. I let another woman push me away from her bedside, and I was asleep when she died. I was not going to leave her in a box somewhere on top of everything else. So I took the binder home, opened it on the kitchen table above the tire shop, and began organizing invoices, tracking deposits, and preparing each payment for my father to authorize. At least, I thought I was only managing a wedding. Tax season saved my life, and I mean that in the least poetic way possible. From January to April, a bookkeeper in a small town can rebuild almost anything because that's the one time of year when small business owners are frightened. I walked down Main Street with a folder and a phone number. Delbrook Florals, Fenway Bakery, Ostrander Lumber, $325 a month for the basic package. I worked from 6 in the morning until 11 at night. By the end of February, referrals from old clients had brought me to 21 accounts, and I was billing $6,800 a month. I put $3,400 against the credit card. I sat in that little room and looked at the new balance for about 10 minutes. Nadine taped a sign to the door of her shop, handwritten in marker. Celia Williams, bookkeeping. She saved my butt. Call her. 3 people called because of that sign. Here's what my life actually looked like in those months, and I want to describe it exactly, because it is the center of everything that happened afterward. At any given hour, my one laptop held 2 spreadsheets side by side. One contained client work, bakery payroll, lumberyard sales tax, the tire shop reconciliation. The other contained my father's wedding budget. His florist was Delbrook Florals. I do their books, so I would spend Tuesday morning reconciling Delbrook's receivables, then prepare the $1,400 payment paperwork for my father to approve that afternoon. The same woman got both emails. Her name is Marion. She never once asked me a question about it, and that was the kindest thing anybody did for me that spring. In February, the insurance paid. My father never gave me the deposit notice. He simply called and said casually that the venue deposit could now move forward. I knew the benefit was $186,000 because I had completed the claim, but I would not confirm where it landed until April. I felt nothing about that money. I never wanted a dollar of it, then or now. It was my mother's, and my mother was in a box somewhere, and money was not the thing I was trying to get back. That is the only reason I didn't look closer, and it cost me 4 more months. In April, he invited me to Easter dinner. I brought a pie because that is what I do. 12 people at the table. Vivian sat at the end where my mother used to sit, and she had done the ham. And everyone said it was wonderful. She was wearing my mother's pearls, not similar pearls, my mother's. Single strand, with the clasp that stuck. You had to press it sideways with your thumbnail, and I watched Vivian do exactly that when she took them off to clear the table. Nobody said anything. My father didn't look at me. I sat there for 2 hours, and I didn't eat, and I didn't say a word. And when a man from the Rotary Club asked what I did for a living, my father answered before I could. She does bookkeeping. He said it the way you'd say she hasn't found anything yet. On the drive home, I realized I couldn't remember eating. I couldn't remember what anyone talked about. I could remember the exact sound of that clasp. By the middle of April, I had 34 clients, and I rented a corner desk in the back of a law office on Chestnut for $150 a month. And for the first time in my adult life, people in Halloway started to know who I was without knowing whose daughter I was. 3 of them referred me to somebody else. One of the referrals came from a woman named Loretta Voss. Loretta runs Voss & Sons, the funeral home on Elm. She's 58, she wears cardigans, and she called me because her bookkeeper had retired, and her general ledger had been a mess for 2 years. I told her I couldn't take anybody new until May. I was underwater. She said, "That's all right, you keep my number." I want you to remember that phone call. I didn't. I filed it in the back of my head with all the other things that happen on a Tuesday. Then, at the end of April, my father gave me access to his bank account. He hated moving money. He always had. He'd rather sign a paper check than log into anything. So, when the venue deposit came due, Kessler Ridge Lodge, $9,200, he gave me the login and told me to just take care of it. I logged in, I pulled up the transfer screen, I typed in the amount, and I looked at the account number. Most people think bookkeeping is data entry. It isn't. It is pattern recognition. After 10 years of staring at strings of digits, your brain stops seeing numbers and starts seeing faces. I could tell you the tire shop's routing number in my sleep, and I had written that account number by hand in December in the direct deposit block of my mother's life insurance claim. I sat there a long time. The cursor blinked in the confirmation field. I clicked it. I need you to hear me say that. I clicked it. I moved $9,200 of my mother's death benefit into the deposit on the party where my father would marry the woman from her bedroom. I did it because he was holding her. That was the whole calculation. But something had come loose, and in May I did the only thing I know how to do when something comes loose. I built a spreadsheet. It took 3 weeks, nights, after the client work, in the room over the garage. Column A held every paid wedding charge from the binder. Column B matched each one to the corresponding bank transaction. Every payment came from the same source. Venue, $9,200. Catering for 140 guests, $14,800. Vivian's ring, $8,600. Her dress, $3,100. Flowers, $4,900. 10 days in Sedona, $6,300. $61,400. Every dollar of it out of the account that received my mother's life insurance. And near the bottom, in the miscellaneous section, was a line item I read 4 times before I understood it. Dumpster rental, Rosalind's room clear out, $410. He had billed the cost of throwing away my mother's belongings to the wedding budget, because in his mind it was a wedding expense. You have to clear the room before you can paint it. I saved the file. I named it Q2 Vendor Reconciliation because I am a bookkeeper and because I did not yet know what I was doing or why. But I knew this much. I was sitting on a spreadsheet my father did not know existed, and there was an envelope on the passenger seat of my car that had been there since Thursday, and I still hadn't opened it. I still got my mail at my father's address. Changing it would have meant a conversation, and I did not have a conversation left in me. So once a month, I'd swing by when his truck was gone, take whatever had my name on it, and throw it on the passenger seat. Dale had listed me as the secondary family contact on the cremation authorization. After 3 notices to him went unanswered, Voss & Sons addressed the final one to me at the same house. I opened it in the laundromat parking lot on June 12th with the engine running, because I assumed Loretta was following up about the bookkeeping. Voss and Sons Funeral Home. Fourth and final notice. Decedent, Williams, Rosalind A. Cremation. Number 24-1208, balance due, 1,380. Status, cremains unclaimed, 186 days. This is our fourth and final notice. Please contact this office regarding disposition. Fourth, the first three had gone to my father and disappeared into the pile of mail he never opened unless an envelope contained a check. $1,880. I read it 4 times. Then I opened the car door, and I was sick on the asphalt, the same way I had been sick on the gravel under his billboard in January, and I want you to notice that my body understood it before I did. Twice now. Both times, it was my body that figured out who my father was. 186 days. $186,000. My father has always said he's good with numbers. Voss and Sons is a brick building on Elm with a green awning. Loretta came out from the back when the bell rang. She looked at me for about 2 seconds. "You're her daughter," she said. "Yes." I called the number on the file, many times. "That's my father's number." She was quiet for a moment. She had a pen in her hand and she set it down. Then she said, "Would you like to see her?" The back room is not what you'd think. It's just a storage room. Shelving, a utility sink, a stack of folded flags. There is a metal shelf along the north wall, and on that shelf there were 4 black plastic boxes, and each one had a printed label. Mine was second row, left. Williams, Rosalind A. Cremation, number 24-1208. Loretta stood behind me. She said, and she said it almost apologetically, "I dust that shelf every week. I don't like dust on people." I have thought about that sentence every day since. A woman who never met my mother had been taking care of her for 186 days. The paperwork allowed the funeral home to begin disposition procedures after repeated notice, and Loretta had already sent 4 of them. She kept putting it off. She kept dusting. I did not take my mother home that day. I didn't have $1,880, and I did not trust myself behind a wheel. I drove back to the room over the garage, and I sat on the floor and I put the whole thing together. This is the part that broke something in me that has not entirely grown back. He had never gone to get her. For nearly 5 months, he had threatened me with something he did not possess. The gun he held over me was empty. He had not driven 10 minutes down Elm Street, paid the bill, returned a call, or opened a single notice. I had been telling myself a story in which my father was cruel. He wasn't cruel. He forgot her. He spent $61,400 of her money on a party. He could not find $1,880 to bring her home. And I had paid him nearly 5 months of my life for a thing he never had. I went to see a lawyer. Her name is Adele Ferris. She does estates out of an office above the pharmacy, and she charges $200 for a consultation. I brought everything: the spreadsheet, the insurance paperwork, the notice from Voss and Sons. She read for 4 minutes. The insurance, he's the named beneficiary. It's his, 100% legal, and he could have bought a boat with it. And my mother's ashes. As the surviving spouse, your father has first priority over disposition unless he waives it or the funeral home treats his failure to respond as abandonment. She closed the folder. You can pay the bill, and Loretta may release the cremains. But if he formally objects, you could be stopped. So I have nothing. You have no case, she said. Those are 2 different sentences. I stood up. I put on my coat. I was almost at the door when she spoke again, and she didn't look up from her desk when she did it. You have the truth. The truth doesn't need a courtroom. It needs a room with people in it. She capped her pen. And I hear your father is inviting a lot of people. In early July, I drove home and opened the blue binder again. Guest list, 140. Seating chart, 18 tables. And the run of show printed on a single sheet, initialed at the bottom right in my father's own handwriting, where he had approved it in March. 7:40 p.m. Celia says a few words about her mother. He wrote that line himself. The first thing I did was decide what I would not do. I keep the books for Delbrook Florals. Delbrook did the flowers for my father's wedding, which means there was a client file on my desk with every payment he'd made and every note Marion wrote about what he said when he made it. I sat in front of that file for a long time. I put my hand on the mouse. Then I closed it. That's my client's money. It isn't mine. If I opened that file, then I would become the thing I was trying to hold him accountable for. A person who takes something that doesn't belong to them because they feel they've earned it. So, I did it the long way. I used only records I was legally entitled to access, documents sent directly to me, and evidence voluntarily provided by witnesses. I never opened a client file to help myself. The phone bill was in the car. It had been sitting on that passenger seat next to the letter from Voss and Sons, and I had been paying it without looking at it since I was 27. I'm the account holder on the family plan. 4 lines. Mine, my father's, my mother's, and an old tablet nobody uses. I never canceled my mother's line. I told myself it was because it was only $11 a month. That is not why. I logged in that night. I went into the account, and I pulled the call detail records, and I set the date range for November and December of 2024. And I found her last 9 days. 14 outgoing attempts appeared in the call history between November 29th and December 7th. 13 were directed to me. 1 was directed to my Aunt Judith. Every entry showed a duration of 0 seconds. Every single one shows a duration of 0 seconds. It took me most of the night to be sure. I called the carrier in the morning to confirm it. A 0-second record meant the carrier had logged no completed connection. It could not tell me whether the other phone rang, who ended the attempt, or why no voicemail remained. But 14 calls ending the same way were enough to make me keep looking. My phone was clean. It had always been clean. Someone may have been interrupting those calls before they connected. 14 attempts demanded an explanation. The last one is on the 7th of December at 3:52 in the morning. She died 24 hours later. I sat on the floor of that room over the tire shop until the sky went gray over the tire stacks. For 6 months, I had been getting maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, and it was always the same 3 questions on a loop. Why did I back off? Why did I sit further from the bed? Why was I 11 minutes away? I thought I had left her. I did not leave her. She had tried to reach me 13 times, and someone had kept the distance between us intact. My mother left me nothing. I want to say that clearly. There was no will with a secret in it, no letter in a drawer, no trust, no plan, no clever thing she did behind my father's back to protect me. She was 56, she was on morphine, and she had no time. She tried to call me 14 times, and then she died. That is everything she left me. It turned out to be enough. Her name is Bernadette Kroll. I found her the way I find everything. In paperwork. The Fairlane home care staffing schedules were in the medical box that I packed and taped shut myself in December. 3 nights a week, in my mother's last month, there was a night aide. She lives in a duplex out past the fairgrounds. She opened the door and she looked at me and she knew exactly who I was, and the first thing she said before I got a word out was this: "I've been waiting for somebody to ask me." She had kept contemporaneous personal notes and a copy of the incident report she submitted to Fairlane. After a bad situation at a nursing home in 2016, she had started documenting every concern she formally reported. Her incident report, dated December 8th, summarized what she had witnessed during the overnight shift. December 7th, 3 in the morning. Patient requested phone X2. LPN Ashcroft moved phone to dresser. Patient became agitated. LPN stated, quote, "Nobody's coming, Rosalind. Go to sleep." Patient cried. Reported to Supervisor 12-8. She filed an internal complaint with Fairlane on the 8th of December, the morning my mother died. The file was closed on the 27th without a completed investigation. Fairlane marked the matter inactive after Vivienne resigned, and the complaint disappeared into an administrative drawer. Bernadette started crying in her own kitchen, and it was not about my mother. I needed that job. I'm 54. She was holding a paper towel and folding it into smaller and smaller squares. I reported it, and when nobody followed up, I let myself believe that was enough. She looked at me. It wasn't. I didn't comfort her. I'm not proud of that, and I'm not ashamed of it either. I just asked her one question. Can you be somewhere on the 16th of August? In July, I paid Voss and Sons $1,880. By July, I had worked the card balance down to $12,720. The funeral bill pushed it back to $14,600 and erased months of progress in seconds. Loretta sent my father one final written notice that I had paid the balance and requested release of the cremains. He did not respond. When the response deadline passed, Loretta carried the box from the back room and placed it in my hands. I drove home. I put my mother on the kitchen table in a room above a tire shop next to a green cardigan that still had a hairbrush tangled in the sleeve. And then I sat down on the floor and I cried out loud for the first time in 7 months, and what I said over and over was this: "I'm sorry. I didn't pick up. I didn't know you were calling." Then I opened the blue binder. I pulled up the seating chart my father put me in charge of, in a binder my father handed me for a wedding my father told me to plan. I added 3 names: Judith Bellamy, Table 6, Bernadette Kroll, Table 9, Loretta Voss, Table 9. The venue still had 3 unused places within the paid head count, so no contract or invoice changed. I sent the final head count to Kessler Ridge Lodge on the 18th of July. My father never looked at it. He has never looked at anything. Then I opened the slideshow file, and I did not finish it. There was one thing left to do first. I owed him one last chance, and I meant it. On the 15th of August, at 8:15 in the evening, I drove to my father's house with my mother in a canvas tote bag on the passenger seat. The rehearsal dinner had ended. The side door was open. Vivienne was at the dining room table with a stack of napkins, testing 2 different folds against a charger plate. My father was in front of the hall mirror with a sheet of paper in his hand, practicing his toast. I set the box on the kitchen counter. He came around the corner. He glanced at the black box and the printed label on its front without leaning close enough to read it. "What is that?" 3 words. He was standing 4 feet from his wife, and he asked me what she was. I did not tell him. I have gone over this 100 times, and I still don't know if that was mercy or cowardice or something colder than both. I just didn't tell him. What I said was this: "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, Halloway Memorial, 40 minutes. He set the paper down. Mom bought a double plot in 2011. Did you know that? $15 a month for 5 years until it was paid off. 2 spaces, one for her and one for you." He didn't say anything. The cemetery accepted the release paperwork and scheduled the opening. I already paid the fee. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to speak. You don't have to bring anybody. You just have to stand there for 40 minutes. I had a folding chair in the trunk in case he wanted to sit down. "And then I'll come back here," I said. and I'll put on the blue dress Vivian picked out for me, and I'll sit at the head table, and I'll get up at 7:40 with the microphone, and I'll say whatever you want me to say." He was watching me now. "I'll tell them you're a good man." I meant it. I had written it out. There was an index card in my purse that said Dale Williams had been married for 32 years, had carried a long illness with grace, and deserved happiness. I was prepared to read that to 140 people who would have believed me. 40 minutes, Dad. That's the whole price. And my father laughed. Not meanly. That's the part nobody believes when I tell it. He wasn't sneering. He genuinely thought it was a little bit funny. The timing of it, the earnestness, the folding chair, he didn't know about. "Celia, it's my wedding day." "I know, 9 in the morning. The ceremony is at 4. I've got 40 people at Delaney's for breakfast. I've got photographs at 11. 40 minutes, after the honeymoon." He turned back to the mirror and adjusted his tie with 2 fingers. "I'll take care of it, I promise." And then he said the last thing he ever said to me as my father. "Don't ruin my day, Celia." From the dining room, Vivian called out, warm as anything, "Do you want to stay for dinner?" I picked my mother up off his kitchen counter and I walked out. He let me carry a black plastic box out of his house at 8:30 that night, without asking a second question. That silence is what I keep coming back to. And driving home, I finally understood the thing I'd been dodging for 250 days. He did not hate either of us. Hatred would have required him to see us, and he never had. I had spent my whole adult life quietly arranging myself around a man who was not looking. You can't ask a blind man to look at you. You have to turn the lights on. I got back to the room over the garage a little before 10. I opened the laptop. I finished the slides. It took 90 minutes. Most of it was scanning. I set the deck to auto-advance every 6 seconds. No clicker, no performance. It would run the way an audit runs, without pausing to ask permission. At 11:52, I emailed the file to Curtis Vandermeer, the AV technician, whose invoices I had been paying since April, and who had treated me as the authorized vendor contact since January because every approval and payment instruction came through me. Subject line: Final, Rosalind tribute segment. Please cue at 7:40. He wrote back in 11 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Loaded and tested. Then I texted Nadine. Can you come early tomorrow? Table 9. She answered in 4 seconds. I'll sit anywhere. Where do you need me? I told her only one thing. If my father moved toward the AV cart, stand in the aisle and do not touch him. I put the box on the nightstand. I slept in a recliner that night. It turns out that once you've slept in one for 15 months, you can't do it any other way. It wasn't my mother's chair. Hers went into a dumpster that cost $410. 7 months earlier, I had bowed my head and taken a blue binder from my father's hand. In the morning, I was going to give it back, and everything inside it belonged to him. The ceremony was at 4 o'clock in the garden at Kessler Ridge Lodge, and I sat in the second row, and I let all of it happen. People are going to ask me why I didn't stop it, because I didn't go there to stop him from marrying her. If he wanted that woman, he could have her. I went there to make sure he kept her. The reception was in the main hall. 18 tables, a dance floor, a screen, 10 feet wide, on a stand behind the head table, because he had wanted the slideshow big. At the head table, beside my father's chair, stood the memorial seat he had added after approving the final chart. Its gold foil card read, "In loving memory of Rosalind." He had seated my mother's absence like a guest so that the town could watch him honor her for the length of one photograph, and then he told the band to start at 8. At 7:38, I got up. I walked to the head table, and I set a black plastic box down on that chair, on top of the gold card. My father looked at it. "What are you doing? Sit down." "You asked me to say a few words about Mom." I put my hand flat on the lid. "I prepared something." He smiled at a man walking past with a drink, and he said, out of the side of his mouth, "Keep it short." Curtis Vandermeer handed me the microphone. "On schedule. On the run of show." Initialed in the bottom right corner in my father's own hand. The lights came down, and the screen came on. Slide 1 was my mother, in 2019, at her desk in the district office, laughing at something outside the frame. She had a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Bookkeeper." I bought it for her as a joke. She used it every day for 6 years. The room went soft. A woman at table 12 made a small sound. My father leaned back with his arm across the back of Vivian's seat, and he was pleased, because this was exactly what he had ordered. I said, "My mother did payroll for the Holloway School District for 22 years. She paid for the house my father lives in." Slide 2. It was a redacted screenshot from the group life insurance statement. Benefit paid, $186,000. Yeah, grandparents. February 2025. The room made a different sound. My mother's life insurance paid out $186,000. I know that number because I filled out the claim. My father said he was too grief-stricken to do the paperwork. Slide 3. The spreadsheet. 68 line items. Wedding budget. Total $61,400. And down the right-hand column, the same account ending in the same 4 digits appeared beside every paid charge. The temperature in that room changed. That's not a figure of speech either. The room seemed to stop breathing all at once. $61,400, I said. The tables you're sitting at, the wine in your hand, the ring. My father stood up. "Turn that off." The deck advanced. 6 seconds. Slide 4. Voss and Sons Funeral Home. 4th and final notice. Balance due $1,180 unsalaried. Cremains unclaimed 186 days. He came out from behind the head table fast, and he did not come toward me. He went for the laptop. Nadine Prescott stepped out of her seat at table 9 and put herself in front of the AV cart. She didn't touch him. She didn't say anything. She stood there with her arms crossed. She's half an inch taller than my father, and she has spent 15 years telling men in that town what their transmission is going to cost. He stopped. The deck kept advancing. It didn't need me anymore. I said, into the microphone, without raising my voice, "You don't have to run, Dad. I'm not holding a clicker. It runs by itself." He turned around. "Same as everything else you left running." Slide 5. White text on black. No graphics. No music. Just a list. Slide 5 showed the call log from my mother's final 9 days. 14 outgoing attempts, 13 to me and 1 to Judith, every entry ending at 0 seconds. It scrolled. 14 lines. In the last 9 days of her life, my mother tried to call me 13 times, and she tried to call her sister once. Not one call connected. Not one reached either of us. Slide 6. Black screen. 6 words in white. She was calling me. At the cue we had agreed on, Bernadette Kroll rose from table 9 in a navy suit, holding a copy of her incident report. Her hand was shaking so badly that the paper rattled. "My name is Bernadette Kroll. I was a night aide with Fairlane Home Care. On December 7th at 3 in the morning, Mrs. Williams asked for her phone. I documented what happened in the incident report I submitted the next morning." She swallowed. "It says, LPN Ashcroft moved phone to dresser. Patient became agitated. LPN stated, quote, 'Nobody's coming, Rosalind. Go to sleep.' Patient cried." She looked directly at Vivian Ashcroft, who was sitting in a $3,100 dress with a napkin still in her lap. I reported it. Nobody called me back. She quit before they finished looking into it. Bernadette's voice cracked all the way through. I stayed quiet for 6 months. I'm sorry about that. I'm not staying quiet anymore. Nobody moved. The wedding photographer had not lowered his camera. There were at least 9 phones up at the back of the room. The president of the Rotary Club was standing at table 4 with his hand over his mouth. I picked my mother up off the empty chair. Then I looked at my father, and I said the only thing I had left. You told me she was gone, and to focus on the present. The room was completely silent. This is the present, Dad. He didn't move. Everything in this room came through the access you gave me. The books, the guest list, the screen, the microphone. The rest came from records and witnesses you assumed nobody would examine. I set the mic down on the head table, next to his champagne. You built this room. I just turned the lights on. Then I walked out with my mother in my arms. Nobody clapped. I would have hated it if anyone had clapped. But when I passed table 6, my Aunt Judith rose. Table 9 followed, then table 4. Not for me. That is what people do when a casket goes by. He came to find me 3 weeks later, September. The parking lot behind the law office on Chestnut, where I rent a desk. He was leaning against my car. He'd lost weight, and his jacket was wrinkled, which is not a thing that has ever been true about my father. 2 clients had withdrawn their listings. Rotary had paused his membership, and people who once stopped him in grocery store aisles had begun looking away. He didn't apologize. Do you know what I'm losing? He said. 30 years in this town. You've lost 3 weeks. I lost my mother. I made a mistake, Celia. And there it was. The whole thing, in 4 words, and he believed it. No, I said. I set my bag down on the hood so I could look at him properly. A mistake is when you oversleep. A mistake is when you forget my birthday. Celia, you made a choice on the 14th of December. Then you made it again on the 15th. Then the 16th. He looked away. 4 letters came to your house. You chose not to open them 4 separate times. I stood in your kitchen the night before your wedding, and I asked you for 40 minutes, and I offered to stand up in front of 140 people and tell them you were a good man. He was very still. By the night before your wedding, you had been given 250 days. You spent every one of them choosing not to act. I picked up my bag. That's not a mistake. That's a habit. He tried one more thing. They always do. Vivian's going to lose her license. I filed the complaint, I said. I sent the nursing board Bernadette Kroll's incident report and Fairlane's closed file. What the board does with that evidence is its decision. You're destroying her life. No. I submitted paperwork. She made her choices in a dying woman's bedroom. I saw my Aunt Judith the next week at the diner on 4th. She had both hands around a coffee cup, and she couldn't look at me for the first 10 minutes. She called me, Judith said. November 30th. I was in a meeting. I saw her name come up on my screen, and I thought, I'll call her back tonight. She turned the cup a quarter turn. I did call back. Nobody answered. Her mouth went tight. I figured she was sleeping. She was on that list too. Just after 4:02 on the 30th of November. 0 seconds. My mother didn't just reach for me. She reached for everyone she loved, and nobody came, and none of us knew. Judith didn't ask me to forgive her. She just said, I couldn't save my sister, but I can stand next to you in December. The last words I gave my father were in that parking lot. You are not invited to the burial. He started to answer, but I continued. You have a space at Holloway Memorial right next to her. She paid $15 a month for 5 years, so you'd have somewhere to lie down. I got in the car. It's yours. I'm not taking it from you. But you're going to have to walk out there by yourself. And you're going to have to lie down in it by yourself. And you're going to know exactly what you paid for those 6 feet of ground. I drove away, and I did not look in the mirror. We buried my mother on the 8th of December, 2025, at 9 in the morning. It was her birthday. It was 1 year to the day since she died. The ground was hard, and the sky was the color of an unwashed sheet, and it was 29 degrees at Holloway Memorial. There were 7 of us. Me, my Aunt Judith, Nadine and her 2 girls, who wore church dresses over long johns and didn't complain once. Bernadette Kroll, in the same navy suit, and Loretta Voss, who came on her own time, and who would not send me a bill, and who told me to stop asking. There was no minister. Judith read something short. Nadine tried to say a few words and couldn't get through the first sentence, and nobody made her finish. The burial lasted exactly 40 minutes. Here is where things stand, and I'm going to keep it plain, because I don't want anybody thinking this story ends with me rich. I have 41 clients, not 400. 41. The credit card is down to $9,100, and it'll be gone by spring. I rent a 2-bedroom on Bellwood with a window that looks at a maple tree. I sleep in a bed now. It took about 2 months to stop waking up at 2 in the morning. I do the books for Voss & Sons without charging Loretta. She has argued about it for 4 months. So far, neither of us has changed the other's mind. I see somebody on Thursdays. We don't talk about my father much. We talk about 14 phone calls and about a woman who backed away from her mother's bed because a professional told her to, and about how long it takes to actually believe a thing you already have the receipts for. My mother's green cardigan hangs on the back of my closet door. I don't wear it. It just lives there. My father remains in the house with Vivian. The nursing board placed her license on emergency suspension in October. By December, she had surrendered it under a consent order rather than contest Bernadette's report and Fairlane's records. With no work and no family nearby, she had nowhere easy to go. Neither of them left. Neither of them left. They have exactly the life they chose together. Nobody speaks to them at church. The sign on Main Street says, Vance Realty Now. The billboard on Route 42 has an insurance agent on it. He wrote me a letter in November, 4 pages. I read it once. He apologized for the wedding, the unopened funeral home notices, and his absence from the cemetery. He never mentioned telling me to focus on the present. I don't think he understands, even now, that it was the worst thing he ever said to me. I did not write back. Hatred would cost energy I need for my own life. I simply stopped, keeping a chair for him. Her stone says, Rosalind A. Williams, 1968, 2024. She kept the books. She kept all of us. And beside it, there is a rectangle of grass with nothing on it. The second space. Bought and paid for $15 at a time by a woman who assumed she was going to be lying next to somebody who loved her. I left it exactly where it is. 40 minutes was all I ever asked of him. He had 250 days to give them, and he refused. So I took them for myself. It was freezing out there. Nadine brought coffee in a thermos, and it tipped over in the back seat of her car and soaked a whole booster seat, and we laughed about it standing at my mother's grave, and then we cried, and both of those things were allowed. It's the first thing I ever did for her that nobody can take back. I didn't need his permission. It turns out I never did. If you are listening at 3 in the morning beside someone else's hospital bed or lying awake wondering whether you did enough for the person you lost, hear this. You probably did. You may simply not have seen the evidence yet. Tell me their name in the comments. Just the name. Somebody should know it. Somebody should say it aloud.